Well, hello. Welcome everybody to our webinar titled Joining the Great Resignation, How to Quit Your Job Gracefully. We are excited to have you here, so welcome again and welcome back if you've been here before. Usually as we get started in our webinars, we give everyone a minute or two to get into Big Marker and get settled. And while we're doing that, please feel free to share where you are joining from in the chat box, as myself and the other career coaches on the team, we like to see where everybody is joining from. It also lets us know that you can hear us, so we know that everybody can hear the presentation. We're excited to dive in to this topic on how to quit your job gracefully. You may have heard some about the Great Resignation, and so we're going to talk through, a way to resign and leave your current employer in a graceful way. But before we dive in, I do want to cover a few housekeeping topics. So if you will just keep in mind that if you have a question, we will have time for a live Q&A at the end of the presentation. So please put your questions into the Q&A section of Big Marker, not the chat section. In the Q&A section, you will be able to see other people's questions. So if you see one that you'd also like the answer to, please click on the thumbs up button to upvote it, so that we can prioritize the questions that we answer during the Q&A. That helps us prioritize them to see which ones are the most popular, because we typically can't get to all of the questions that come into the Q&A, but we can guarantee that you will learn something from the questions that are answered, as well as, certainly letting us know what other questions besides yours that other people put in that you'd like to have answered as well. This webinar will last about 45 minutes with a short Q&A at the end, as we've just been talking about. And no need to try to take furious notes while we're going through the content. It's fine to take notes if you want to do that, but this webinar will be recorded and a link to the video will be sent out shortly, and all of the resources that we cover today. And speaking of recordings, this actually is a recording of the webinar already. And while we're going through the content, there is a career coach here live. It might be myself or one of the other members of the coaching team who will be answering questions during the webinar, as well as vocally during the Q&A. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started talking about our topics today. Since the pandemic started, you may have heard about the Great Resignation. 2021 saw record numbers of people leaving their jobs, and so far this year does seem to be following that same trend. If you are one of the people who is thinking about resigning, whether for a better work environment, more of a challenge, or for a career change, the topics we're going to discuss today will be helpful for you moving forward. We're going to talk about what quitting gracefully looks like, how you will be able to prepare in advance to make this move, keeping your cool and adopting a calm mindset, how to handle tricky situations like submitting your resignation and how to go through an exit interview and prepare for those, and finally the Q&A. So what does quitting gracefully look like? Or rather, what does it not look like? Our thoughts and our hope with this topic is to help you avoid some of the situations that maybe we've all at least thought about. Some of us maybe have experienced in our careers the non-graceful quitting of a job. So let's briefly talk about that first, what quitting gracefully is not. So rage quitting is the urge to quit your job on the spot when you feel like you've been wronged at work in some way. It's fueled by emotions, powerful emotions like anger, betrayal, frustration, even fear of your own safety. That's rage quitting. Abruptly quitting is similar to rage quitting, but without the intense anger Abrupt quitting often comes up during periods of prolonged stress, during burnout, scope creep, horrible or harsh schedules, feelings of being dismissed at work, a lack of power, or lack of agency. And lastly, there is the act of resigning and giving 2 weeks notice, which is a professional courtesy, but then acting unprofessionally for those last 2 weeks through slacking off, not clearing up any projects or cleaning up, loose ends, failing to provide any sort of helpful information to the team you're leaving about how to do your job. So this is not quitting gracefully. These three types of ways to quit. Let's talk about what it is. What does it mean to gracefully resign or quit from a job? To be clear, graceful quitting does not mean you actually feel graceful all of the time, but it is the act of quitting with grace despite any of those negative feelings you might have. It's sort of like taking the high road, so to speak. And graceful quitting can be any combination of the following things that we'll talk about on the slide. And there are other attributes that may apply to your situations as well. So when you provide proper resignation or setting your employer up for the best possible scenario, you're going to give 2 weeks notice or even more if you can and if you want to. 2 weeks notice is customary and typically what employers may ask for. Now, some employers may not ask you to stay for that 2 weeks, and that's always, up to their discretion. But giving that notice is, customary, and it is part of resigning and making sure that you are not burning any bridges. What working out loud means is really just sharing any info you keep in your head and how you do your job. So making sure that as you are wrapping up your time at the organization, you are making notes, you are telling the people who may need to know those things that are in your head so that they can pick up on any projects or client work as you exit. Finishing projects, telling your clients and passing responsibilities to others, like tying up your loose ends. When possible, when you're leaving a job, even if it's a situation that you haven't been happy in, trying to show your appreciation and gratitude for the experiences that you have had while at the organization can be helpful for those that you are leaving behind. It's important when you leave a job, no matter the situation, but making sure that you have coping strategies in place, taking breaks, any deep breathing exercises and self-care, depending on how long you've been at an organization, whether it's been years or months, you think about years and years at an organization really is going to take some debriefing time. If it's been months and you've been onboarding and training and learning all these new things, that also will take some time and requires some self-care. Also, graceful quitting is looking forward. Remember your goal, reward yourself at the end, getting to that end of that 2-week period, and be visualizing yourself in your new job and in your new adventure. All right, so preparing in advance, we'll go over some of these things in a little bit more detail, but ideally, you want to start thinking about how you're going to leave your job well before you are in that position. If possible, start thinking about resigning from your job when you begin your new job search. Things that will help you are saving your work samples, either anonymize them or actually save them depending on the nature of the work that you do. These can also come in handy in your job search. Write or create your real job description, something that is more detailed than what you actually do on the job, that is based in your daily reality, not necessarily the high-level job description you started the job with or the one that you read when you applied and started working. Again, If you've been at the company for a long time, or maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the length of time you've been there, your role may have evolved somewhat. And so writing down your real job description is going to help when you're ready to move on, because it shows what your company is going to be missing when you're gone and what they'll need to hire for, what kinds of things they'll need to look for in the person that they choose to replace you. Avoid senioritis. I think it's interesting to talk about this when we're talking about jobs that we're leaving, but it is, important, and it's totally normal to feel unmotivated when you've decided to start looking for a new job. After all, you might be thinking, I'll be out of here any day, right? And so you might feel like you can start the senior slide, if you will, but that's not really how it works in reality. Job searching can take several months, maybe even 6 to 12 months or longer. So before you land your next role, you could still be doing this current role for months more. Stay motivated, do a good job so you can keep your job until the new one is finalized. Of course, if you're already entertaining offers, then it's time to start doing the first two things right away, saving your work samples and converting your job description. But if you're just searching for jobs, all of this will have the added advantage of making you a better and more effective job seeker. You'll be able to more clearly talk about your current work, show samples of your work, and draw from current experiences in your interviews. So it is really a holistic part of your job search, is thinking about this exit strategy when you are going to leave a job that you are currently in. When you are leaving, it's likely that you'll want to do some training with your current teammates. So out of respect and kindness for them, you might consider what things you could train them well on before you're ready to leave. This sort of training does not have to be obvious, of course, especially if they don't know that you're leaving. It can definitely be more subtle. You might know that you're planning to leave your job at some point, but you don't have to share that info before you're ready or before you have another job lined up. Instead, this type of low-key training comes in the form of working out loud, clearing up some outstanding projects, introducing teammates to the people you collaborate with and suggesting they get to know each other, and helping the people you work closest with learn how to do some of the things that you do. Think about any places where you are the sole point person or the single point of failure for anything that you do at work, and then try to involve someone else in that work so they will have enough general knowledge when it comes time for you to leave. This is going to help put your team, your coworkers, and your organization in a better spot when you leave. All right, so how can you keep your cool and make sure you're adopting a calm mindset when you're going through this process? If you're in the situation where you're leaving your job because you've reached your wit's end, you've had a bad experience, or you're feeling strong negative emotions, it's probably time to coach yourself through some of these techniques. Because if you're quitting because you can't stand it, there's some things that you want to do to make the time that you have left at your organization not as miserable, if we can say it that way. So things that you want to do is focus on what you can actually control. There are certain things that are in your control and certain things that are not. And so maintaining that focus on your ability to control things in the areas that you can control them will be helpful. Anytime you can spend some time reframing negative situations by reminding yourself you can only be responsible for your attitude and your behavior. You are responsible for you and your attitude and your behavior. So helping yourself to reframe any of those challenges is helpful. Get curious about your big emotions. So stepping outside of that emotional zone to look at our own emotions from the outside can really be helpful to remove us from those out of control feelings that strong emotions give us. Put on a scientist hat almost and ask yourself curious questions to discover where this particular emotion is coming from. Now, this strategy is shown to weaken strong emotions and allow us to regain our composure. A lot of times when working with career coaching clients, we encourage people to take the emotion out of, submitting your resume for another job application, or try to take the emotion out of, the job interview process and really look at it as though it's a project you're doing for work, or how you would approach a project at work, or really trying to look at it outside of that emotion so that you can have a clear and level head. Practice the coping techniques that work well for you as well. Things like meditation can be really helpful. This does not have to be something that's formal and lasts 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or a really long time. I know there are apps out there, Headspace, Calm, there are many others. A while ago in our family, we used to say, Alexa, can we do the meditation minute? So even Alexa has 1 minute of meditation every day. So you can do a quick meditation even at your desk to concentrate on your breathing and to really center yourself. And it can help you get through some of these hard or challenging times within your last 2 weeks or your last days at your employer. Make plans with people who fill you up and who energize you. And these are people that may be out of your work environment and probably are if it's not a good situation at work. So make sure you surround yourself with people who are going to help you feel good. Same with activities and anything that you can do to help the positive emotion or effect take over. So whether that's working out, reading, talking with a friend, talking with your parent, going out to eat, going to a movie bite, whatever that might be, walking your dog, playing fetch with your pet, activities that fill you up will help as well. Anything that might be necessary in terms of therapy or outside support. And again, forward thinking and visualizing your next role or what life after this job will feel like, and feeling those positive feelings to kind of help you get through the reasons that you're quitting this current job, if it's because you can't stand it and it's a negative situation for you. Even if you are leaving a job that you've enjoyed, just like a job that you've disliked, we can all experience senioritis. I already brought this up. We'll dive into it a little bit more, but it's that feeling of a total lack of motivation because the end is coming. Like when you're a senior in high school or college and it's the last few weeks of school, this really is not a great way to leave a job. So try some of these ideas to refocus yourself so you can finish strong. Focus on specific problems to motivate yourself to find solutions. So maybe you could look at it like, if I was new to this role and I came into this role and the person had already left, what are some things that would be really helpful for me to know on my first day? A specific problem or specific issue. What does this person need on their first day? What logins might they need? Who should they talk to? What should their first day or plan look like? That might be a way for you to have some focus on what you can do to help set up your replacement for success. Collaborate and communicate with your current teammates before you leave on what they think might be most helpful for you to do or to prepare before you leave. Make sure that you are using simple productivity things like making lists, using timer, or using a timer, or you could even do some work with focusmate.com, which is an organization that you can use for free. If you're a FlexJobs member, you can have three different sessions per week, I think, where you can have focused work time and have accountability during that time. So that's a tip and trick there as well. And then during the last few days of your tenure, the last 2 weeks, plan something fun or something, again, that fills your bucket or fills you up each night of those last 2 weeks of work and for your last day, so that you can really have some closure and close out on a high note. All right. So these are the things that we just talked about leading up until now are really the preparation phases, the thought process, the steps you can take to ensure that when you handle or turn in your resignation and your exit interview, you are not burning any bridges and you are doing all of the things that are appropriate to do when you're leaving a place of employment gracefully. So let's talk about how to actually resign from a job. So written or verbal, which method is best? Well, written resignations are typically required by most human resource departments as part of their record keeping. That being said, you might be in a situation where telling your manager or a small group of people verbally is the right thing to do first before submitting your letter of resignation. This ultimately depends on your individual work situation. So think about the relationships you have with your manager and their manager. And if you're at a smaller company, you might also have a closer relationship with an HR person and want to speak with them first as well. So inevitably, it's pretty likely you will be asked to have a written resignation that you can send to somebody in HR. But also, it could very well be possible and maybe likely that you will also do something verbally, and the verbal piece of it might come first. Either option or both options, a couple of things to keep in mind. When you are writing your resignation or planning what to say, you want to keep it brief. You want to include the basics of the situation, that you are resigning and you are giving 2 weeks notice or however many weeks notice you are giving. You want to talk about your desire for the transition to go smoothly. You should express gratitude for the time you've had with the company. If you feel like it makes sense and it's warranted, you can certainly discuss the difficult decision and some of your reasoning behind the move and what prompted you to make the move. Be prepared to be asked about these things and have something to share. You don't have to give your employer every single detail, especially if your decision to leave comes from, some negative experiences, but you certainly can give them some of the detail that you're comfortable with, and just know that you will likely be asked those things. So if you think about this ahead of time, it can make a conversation that, is a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit more manageable, if you will. Here are some examples or samples of resignation letters, and actually these are the pieces of a resignation letter, and on the upcoming slides we'll have some text that I can read to you and that you'll have access to in the resources. So the basics are, I hereby submit my resignation from the role of administrative assistant at Company X. My last day of employment will be October 3rd, 2021. So again, you are letting them know you're resigning, and your last day is such and such of a date. Please accept this letter as a formal notice that I will be resigning as Human Resources Coordinator as of August 14, 2016. That's just another way that you can say that. For the smooth transition, or how you want to highlight the smooth transition piece, I'm committed to making this transition as smooth as possible for the company. Therefore, I will, and then you can write a sentence or two about what you might do. And then finally, as far as gratitude, I'd like to take a moment to thank the company for the opportunity to be a part of X project or whatever it is that you think makes sense there. But you want to have something brief that goes over the basics, the logistics, if you will, how you'll help transition out, and then a note of thanks or gratitude for the opportunity, as much as is appropriate. Again, we're graceful. All right, so here's an example of a resignation letter. These are going to be emailed with the link to the recording in the next couple days. So again, you don't have to take notes on this. They are also right now in the resource section of Big Marker. If you'd like to go to the resource section and grab the link for examples of resignation letters. So I'll just kind of go through this and vocalize it so that you guys can hear it. And when you compose your letter, certainly use a template like this, but make sure that it's in your tone and it matches, your company, your experience, and those types of things. But dear supervisor, first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to learn and grow professionally at name of company over the past however many years. I've learned a lot about, and then you could put something applicable to the role that you were in. I've learned a lot about career coaching or whatever that might be. And I am confident that this experience has prepared me well for future opportunities. After much thought and careful consideration, I have decided to pursue another career opportunity and am resigning from my position with this company. I am willing to stay until month day to assist with the transition of my responsibilities before I leave. It has been a pleasure working with you and the team, and I wish you all the best for the future. Sincerely, your name. All right, so that's one way that you can write your resignation letter. And here's one that is slightly different. I'll go ahead and just verbalize this one as well. Dear supervisor, after careful thought and consideration, I am submitting my resignation effective date 2020, whatever year. Working at company name as a job title, career coach, whatever that is, has been very rewarding. During my time here, I have learned a lot about the role. I feel ready and able to take on new challenges because of the wonderful training and development opportunities I have been given in this role. Please know I am happy to assist with my transition and can be available after X date if needed. I wish you, the team, and the rest of the company nothing but the best going forward. Thank you again for the opportunity to work with you at company. I look forward to staying in touch and following the company's future success. Sincerely, and then you can add your name. So again, it's very brief and it's also not negative. It's very gracious and, straight to the point in terms of what your plans are. You don't have to go into any detail about the position, the company, where you're going and what you're doing in your resignation letter. You might get asked that in conversations in like your exit interview, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you don't have to put any of that in your resignation letter. Speaking of exit interviews, your soon-to-be former employer will want to know why you're leaving. In fact, 91% of Fortune 500 companies and 87% of mid-sized companies hold exit interviews. They're trying to see what they can do going forward to keep other employees from leaving, certainly. So instead of being apprehensive, about the interview, look at the interview as an opportunity to think critically about your experience, the experiences you've had at the organization, maybe putting a list together of things that you learned while you were there, things that you might be able to share with the company in terms of things that they could do to improve. Companies do track employee satisfaction, they track turnover, and they will probably ask about how they could improve. So no matter why you're leaving the job, there's a good chance you might feel emotional about it. Our jobs, our careers play a huge role in our lives every day. So even when leaving the job is the right choice, it can be emotional and even bittersweet. So preparing ahead of time is the key to managing those emotions and remaining calm and professional during an exit interview. On the slide, we have listed some of the most common questions you might get during an exit interview. So just like with the job interview, you'll want to prepare a bit to answer these questions so you're not caught off guard in the interview. They might ask you things like, why are you leaving? Did you have the tools to succeed in this job? How was your manager? What did you like and dislike about the job? And do you have any concerns we should be aware of? And when it comes to, maybe the not so awesome aspects of your job, honesty is important, but so is leaving things a little bit vague. You don't want to lie about your reasons for leaving, and HR should understand why you're leaving. However, no matter what you say, how you say it is just as important. So make sure that your tone level is professional. Now is not the time to be angry or to badmouth your boss or any of your colleagues. It's not really to be used. The exit interview is not really to be used as a complaining session at this point. That is likely not very helpful for you or for them, because you've already decided you're moving on and you are, in fact, going to do that. And so those are some things to keep in mind for exit interviews. All right, so what can you do if you are thinking about being, one of the folks who joins the Great Resignation and moves on to another role? Planning is really important. So if you've already started your job search, you should also be planning how you're going to resign from your role. If you haven't started your job search yet, when you do, this is another piece of your job search action plan, is thinking about how you're going to step out of the role you are in. Practice the key aspects of quitting gracefully, giving notice, working out loud, making sure you're tying up those loose ends, ensuring that you have the coping strategies to help you get through this transition. And finally, again, for tricky situations like actually writing and verbalizing your resignation and going through an exit interview, thinking it through and planning ahead is really critical to make everything smooth and as comfortable as it can be in these sometimes, difficult conversations to have. And all that being said, we'll go into our Q&A in just a second. I do want to remind everybody again, the copy of the recording as well as the resources that were used for this webinar will be emailed within the next few days. So check your spam folder if you don't see that, just in case. You can also check out the resources tab right now in big marker and click on any of those links if you don't want to wait. For any other tips or tricks that you want, we always recommend going to flexjobs.com/blog. Thousands of articles there for any part of your job search, including resigning, interviewing, and all of those other things, everything in between. And what we'll do now is we're going to open it up to questions that I will remind you should go in the Q&A section of Big Marker. And let's go see what questions are there.
Okay, my name is Doug, and I'm one of the career coaches here on the FlexJobs coaching team. And glad to be here with you for this webinar. Really, really good information that Tony has been sharing. She's just she's a wealth of good information, and that was a outstanding presentation on that. I am in the Q&A portion here right now and looking for questions. If somebody would just real quickly give me a hello, I can hear you, Doug, in the chat section, please. And specifically in the chat, that would be great. All right, good. Folks telling me they can hear me. Wonderful. Good. Well, I appreciate that. Good. As I'm in the chat section here, in the Q&A section here, I don't see any questions that have come in. But we will kind of give it a minute or two as I'm kind of chatting about a couple of things here to see if there's a question or two that rolls in specifically that any of the attendees have here. I guess as we're just seeing if a question or two comes in before we wrap up, I will say this, just some additional thoughts to add to what Tony has already shared. In that, you know what, in this process. Uh, it's just great to hold your head up. Always take the high road, right? There's an old saying that what comes around goes around, and I'm a firm believer in that. That if we just choose in our business that we do, the business that we do, the way that we present ourselves, the way that we conduct ourselves, the way that we interact and do business and work within the work world with other people. You know what, if we take the high road, we can expect that not always do people treat us nicely, but I think that in the long run, what comes around goes around. What we sow, we reap. What we do, we get benefit out of it for our good, healthy actions and our good, healthy approach. So I just want to encourage you to kind of think about that. Always take the high road. Always hold your head up in these sorts of situations, and I think the good will come back to you, is what I truly believe. Let's see. We do have one question in here. How do you quit a job that has exhausted you completely, but you seem to be instrumental for the team and also know that quitting will not be easy? Yeah, you know what? That is certainly a tough process, especially when you've kind of developed good friendships, oftentimes relationships, and you're concerned about how that's going to impact them or affect them. The reality is with that is sometimes if I stay in an environment that is completely exhausting me, and I'm going to speak from somebody who has personal experience in this. I've been through a real significant workplace burnout myself, and it really left me taking months to recoup, to recover from that. I found myself in a situation where I was first tired, then exhausted, and continuing to try to keep going in that environment. And only you can make this decision as to where you are in that whole spectrum of exhaustion leading to burnout. But what I do want to encourage you is, if you leave yourself in an environment long enough where you suffer a significant burnout, um, it's going to uh, it's going to impact you in negative ways that you really don't want. And to the extent that we stay in that environment is to the degree of time that it might take us to really recover from that. That is not only mentally exhausting, but it can be physically draining too to our bodies. So I just want to encourage you to kind of be thinking about yourself. I know that that sometimes, and this is what I'm reading into this, is that you're instrumental in the team. There are other people that are going to be impacted by that. However, if this environment is being led, and I'm just saying this hypothetically, I don't know your environment, but if it's being led in a way where management is establishing processes that are doing this to people, if you're not in a position to uh, influence change in that, you're not going to be able to do much about that. And I know that those people may be impacted by your leaving, and I'm sorry to hear that. But at some point, we need to make a determination of what can I physically do. And sometimes if I have to leave, it may just be the right choice for me personally, me physically, me mentally, me emotionally. So yeah, that's a tough case. In a case where you're not leaving because of burnout or lack of motivation for the job, but the sole reasoning of being the wage, I want to return to the company. Is it recommended to outrightly tell management I want to come back in some capacity in a different, higher paying role? I think that if you are leaving or have left a particular position, um, by all means, when you're having that conversation with them in an exit interview, I think that bringing up, as Tony had said, bringing up the reasoning, when they ask the questions, something like, hey, is there anything else that we should know? Or, was there something about the job that caused you to look elsewhere? That sort of thing. I think it's fully acceptable to bring up the wage piece. If that is what's really impacting you. My goodness, I love this job. I think I was successful at it. I love the people. It was a good role for me. It's a great fit. But quite honestly, the salary just does not meet, my needs at this time. I've had to look for something else. We want to be careful to not give ultimatums in those conversations, and have it come off as in some sort of manipulative way. But oftentimes, if we're just candid in our conversations, I really love this job. I've excelled at it. My performance appraisals have been really good, but it's a financial decision. That gives them an opportunity to at least consider that. And perhaps there is something in their budget where they can make an adjustment to keep a good employee such as yourself, right? Well, I tell you what, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, so we'll kind of go ahead and wrap up. I do want to throw something out though, as we're doing this. Something that came to mind as Tony was presenting, and quitting gracefully is is not only for the employer, and I think you see this from what Tony presented, but quitting gracefully is not only for the advantage of the employer, but it's also for our advantage. If we quit, the way that we leave one place is the way that we arrive at the next. If we don't deal with some emotions, let's just say we have had a negative situation, and I understand we're not always quitting because of a negative situation, right? But there are times where people quit. It's a negative situation, and they're burnt out, or they're just they're frustrated. They weren't treated well. They weren't paid well, even sometimes that can cause frustration. But the way that we leave one place is the way that we arrive at the next, so to speak. So our mental state, unless we transition, that mental state goes to the next place. And why do I say this? Because as a coach, I've had conversations with people at times where they're interviewing and they're saying, I don't know why I get to the interviewing stage and it all seems to fall apart. And as I talk to them, oftentimes I can hear, frustration in their voice, negativity, sometimes even bitterness will come through. And if we carry this into an interview, if we haven't, say, processed that and got our attitude and our head into a positive place by the time we are interviewing for other positions, or even starting in that new position. Sometimes our conversation with those people at the new place can be, somewhat seeded with some of these negative things. So oftentimes, if we follow this process of quitting gracefully, of getting our head into a good place as we move forward in our career, it's not only good for the employer that we, moved on from, but also for the employer that we're going to, and for ourselves in being successful in that new place. So, with all that being said, you know what? It's so good to have all of you here today for this webinar. We always enjoy having these good crowds here and the good interaction. We love having you be a part of that, and we love having you be a part of FlexJobs and being a member here. From all of us here at the coaching staff, we want to say thank you for being a part of these. Look forward to seeing you. We look forward to seeing you at some webinars coming up here in the future. And just a quick reminder that a recording of this webinar, as well as the resources, will be emailed out to you at the email that you use to register for the event. That should go out in about a week. If for some reason you don't see it, by all means, take a look in your spam folder and see if it maybe landed there. From all of us at FlexJobs, all the best to you in your job search. Have a great day. Thanks, and bye now.